1994, Yevgeny Berzin, Giorgio Furlan and Morano Argentin beat the favourites in one of the most important classics of the season, the Flèche Wallonne, and all three took to the podium after dominating the last kilometres of the race. 2 years later, Patrick Lefevere's Mapei team made another historic hat-trick, this time though in a monument, Paris-Roubaix, with Belgian Johan Museo and the Italians Gianluca Bortolami and Andrea Taffi. These two exhibitions, although there were no doping sanctions or positives amongst the winning riders, were, for several of their rivals and Epocha experts, the high tide level in doping of cycling in the 90s. With group exhibitions that were obviously related to the systematic doping that we explicitly met in 1998 with the Festina case. Today, in the middle of 2022, both UAE Emirates in the Trofeo La Galea and Jumbo Visma in Paris-Nice have achieved 2 hat-tricks, which, although less spectacular than those of the 90s, do make the fan wonder if these exhibitions are credible. Do you want to know if they are? Well, Cycling Stories investigates. Without further ado, let the show begin. It is clear that in this beginning of 2022, the squads that have the 2 best riders in the world, the Slovenians Tadej Pogacar and Primoz Roglic, have wonderful rosters and adequate gregarios for their leaders in all competitions. The change, however, has been substantial from the 2021 season to this one, which has just started. UAE Team Emirates has strengthened very nicely in the transfer market, it's true, but its number of victories is on track to grow exponentially. Whilst last year they had a total of 32 victories, half of them by Tadej Pogacar, this year they already have 13, with winning cyclists like Brandon McNulty, Alessandro Covi and Jan Polanc, amongst others not used to raising their arms in victory. Jumbo Visma has hardly changed its roster at all, and this year it is already performing better than in last year. While in 2021, at this stage of the campaign, it only had 2 wins, this year it already has 4, including Van Aert's Het Nieuwsblad and today's exhibition in Paris-Nice. It was precisely this exhibition that set alarm bells ringing in the peloton. After a very fast day, not exactly flat and with multiple climbs, the peloton arrived 6 kilometers to go at the Cote de Bois Robert, a small climb of just over 1 kilometer at 7% average gradient. As soon as we arrived, we observed 2 very relevant traits of what we can probably continue to expect to see this season. On the one hand, Mike Tunison was at the head of the bunch, displaying unusual power. On the other, the current champion of Paris-Roubaix and author of a 2021 Martian story, Sonny Colbrelli, stayed close to the front as the pace picked up. Despite obviously being in good shape after finishing second in Het Nieuwsblad, is already more than buried by the cycling authorities. Right after that, it was the Frenchman Christophe Laporte, a 29-year-old sprinter and classics specialist signed from Cofidis and whose greatest triumph was in the Grand Prix de Wallonie last year, who, as he had already done in Kuurne-Brussels-Kuurne, figuratively and maybe literally destroyed the peloton, and only his teammate Primoz Roglic and Wout van Aert were able to follow the impressive pedalling of that hard-working, selfless rider. Riders who had shown very good legs at the beginning of the campaign, such as Brandon McNulty, the British man Adam Yates, the Colombian Nairito Quintana and the Russian Alexander Vlasov, were left completely blown and detached, unable to follow the wheels of those 3 titans. It is one thing for Pogacar to beat you as he did in the UAE Tour to Yates, or that the world champion Alaphilippe could withstand an attack by Nairito in the mountains. However, it's quite another thing for the 91st classified rider of the previous Tour de France to smash to pieces some of the best riders in the world on a small climb. The best example was Quickstep's Zdeněk Stybar, the only man well positioned and smart enough to foresee the move and to try to get away with the Jumbo posse to at least try to get the stage win. It was totally impossible. When Wout van Aert took over from Laporte, the wreckage was even greater, and the Czech rider was left without breath nor strength in his legs. Laporte, who had given the most powerful pulls on the climb, insultingly overtook the quick-step rider and stuck to the wheels of his two teammates, the three of them now in a breakaway for the victory. There were still 5 kilometers to go, and the difference between the Jumbo trio and the bunch was not insurmountable, only 15 seconds, but it was in vain. The superb organisation of the riders of the Dutch team and their incredible power on the flat caused that difference to increase and increase to the point of winning with 25 seconds left in hand to the rest, finishing ahead of the fastest men that were sprinting at full speed, while they were able to celebrate and even give the victory to Christophe Laporte. A fully fledged exhibition, even more incredible if you look at the data. We are talking here about a VAM, or maximum aerobic speed, of 2,215 meters per hour of the leading trio. A real savagery, considering how competitive the stage had been, and with ode to climbs of the Wall of Oi in the Flèche Wallonne. A real sobriety that clearly shows that this team is above the others, except for UAE Team Emirates. Perhaps the greatest example of the impotence of the rivals of these two super teams is that of Alejandro Valverde, a world champion at his best, and within the last 3 years. He celebrated his second place in the Strade Bianche after Tadeo's exhibition as if he had won. He declared at the finish line that with performances like that, there was little more that he could do. And if there is one thing that Valverde knows more about than any other rider in the peloton, it is ultra-mythical exhibitions. Many will not believe this performance today, whilst others will. What is clear is that whether it is with ketones, with legal methods, or with the most under-the-radar cheating, UAE Team Emirates and Jumbo Visma are no longer Tadej Pogacar and Primoz Roglic. They are now two super teams that occupied a place that, many years ago, was taken by the Sky team and a legendary YouTuber climber who hates time trial bikes.